Buongiorno a tutti anche da parte mia. After Sabine's remarks, I would like to add just a few observations on the cover picture we have chosen for our conference, a painting on panel today in the Martin von Wagner Museum in Würzburg. It seems to perfectly illustrate the range of aspects which were linked in the Renaissance to the quest for ideal forms and ideal seeing, aesthetical, ethical, and political ideas, only missing the religious component. The painting shows two half figures in a complex setting, a bearded man dressed in black and wearing a beret standing at a high desk, holding a pair of compasses in front of a white sheet. Halfway covered by his sleeve, we can just spot a metallic black inkwell with a box of blotting sand sitting on the sloping surface of the desk. I'm speaking about this particular here. Gesticulating with the other hand, he seems to be explaining something, lecturing someone, or giving instructions. In doing so, he turns to a large mirror, which is attached to the wall, its wooden cover removed to the left, and I hope you can see it, the light is not ideal. The wooden cover removed to the left and establishes an eye contact with a painter standing behind him. We cannot see this painter directly, but only through his reflection in the mirror. He is dressed in ochre, wears a matching beret, and appears to be intently watching the scenery, capturing it with his brush on a canvas, which is located just outside the picture as well. The spectator of the painting finds himself more or less in the position where we would imagine this painter standing in front of the picture. This impression and suggestive effect are critically enforced by the fact that the painting, which with its size by 81 to 62 centimeters, seems to depict life-size figures. Date and attribution of the painting are highly disputed. In 1983, Cristina Hermann Fiore argued the case for the Genoese Giovanni Battista Paggi and believed it to be executed around 1580 when Paggi worked in Florence. She considered Pietro Francavilla as the architect portrait. Most recently, in 2004, Severin Hansbauer suggested Bernardino Licinio as the author and a time of origin around 1530. Next to Licinio, Hansbauer considered the architect and sculptor Jacopo Sansovino a possibility. I don't believe either proposal, but agree with Hansbauer that the painting was most probably made around 1530. Its central part is severely damaged, and the repainting has created a sfumato effect that might have been mistaken for northern Italian origin. What seems fairly clear is that we are confronted with a friendship portrait, two males on an equal footing, one behind each other. One might think of Raphael's portrait with his fencing master, which has been turned through the introduction of a mirror image into an even more complex composition. At first glance, a large-size painting by Maso da San Friano from 1556, today in Naples, shows a similar scene. An older man instructing a younger one in the use of compasses on a ground plan. However, there are big differences. The protagonists are separated not only by age, but also by knowledge and social status, as indicated by their clothing. It has been suggested, and with good reasons, that the two men are Prince Orsini, approximately at the age of 30, and his military architect. In Renaissance categories, this is not ideal friendship, but a relation characterized by vertical hierarchies. Who are our two friends? One is obviously a painter. The idea of blending the edge of the mirror or picture plane and the putative canvas in front of the painting was taken up in 1555 by Alessandro Allori. But the idea is also documented before our Würzburg painting in the unpublished self-portrait of Franciabigio from around 1516 And this portrait, at least to my knowledge, is the first panel painting, panel painting and self-portrait of an Italian artist with the brush in hand. That the other friend is an architect is less clear, though. Of course, there are representations of architects with compasses. However, the elderly man in a little-known portrait from the School of Giordano in Munich probably holds his compasses for completely other reasons. And the same is true for other portraits of the 16th century, a sculptor antiquarian from the 1530s, and the representation of the sculptor Giambologna in his studio, both not primarily architects. In my view, we could leave the profession of the man in black open. It seems more important to emphasize that he's measuring some kind of drawing. Now, Cesare Ripa's personification of disegno with compasses and mirror is several decades later than our painting, but the confrontation reminds us that also in the painting, the man at the desk is engaged in intellectually more elevated operations, measuring, drawing, and maybe also teaching, whereas his friend, the painter, executed the scene in color. So the whole painting might also be about the combination of a more theoretical and a more practical approach to representation. All this would nicely fit with the first wave of pictures that try to visualize the Paragone discussions, the famous Savoldo, and the Venetian painting formerly in Berlin. But the comparison with Savoldo's large mirrors, as well as Parmigianino's distorted mirror in the round, make it also evident that the mirror in our painting is strange, a light blue field. Either it has been overpainted or its mimetic quality was not so important. The mirror, with the wooden lid pulled aside, reminds us mostly of a depiction in Achille Bocchi's Symbolicarum Questionum de Universo Genere, published in 1555. In this emblem, Socrates, named in the inscription presumably together with his good daimon, holds up precisely this kind of mirror to the spectator. The mirror is a bit smaller and its lid has been pulled aside only partially. The aim of this visualizing of the self is the famous principle of Socrates, know thyself. It reminds us of the fact that in the Würzburg painting too, the lid of the mirror had been pulled aside only for these two friends. We thus see a conscious act of self-reflection, not a more or less accidental reflection in a mirror. In Renaissance texts, this holding up of a mirror and insisting on self-knowledge is described as Socrates' main philosophical achievement. This becomes almost a fashionable topic in paintings during the 17th century. Socrates with different students, Socrates holding up a mirror to the spectator, and so forth. And the motto, know thyself, was also engraved even on real mirrors, casting a warning over one's own face upon every look in the mirror. As can be seen in the stone convex mirror in the Castel del Buon Consiglio in Trento from around 1530, this advice was intended not only for children and young men. The brightly polished black hemisphere can be found on the third floor at the entrance to the ceremonial hall. With its inscription Greek and Latin, Gnati sauton id es cognoscete ipsum, the stone mirror reminded Bishop Bernardo Claes every time he entered the Hall of Fame to keep in mind his own flaws and the constant necessity to improve his own self, to become as ideal as possible. Bearing this in mind, it seems logical that the arrangement of the Würzburg double portrait with a mirror at its center was also to refer to know thyself. However, this general reminder of virtue in the picture would have been connected to the Platonic concept of ideal friendship as a kind of mirror. To look at one's friend is to look at oneself as if in a mirror. One's friend is another self, and at the same time the counterpart in an ideal friendship is a constant incentive to improve one's own virtue and personality. The Würzburg painting seems to visualize and merge these two mirror metaphors of Socrates and Plato. Socrates' admonition, know thyself, would thus be connected with the Platonic ideal of the friend as a motivating reflection of the self and as an ideal alter ego. I can only briefly mention that in Renaissance art, the concept of the friend as an ideal reflection was widely connected to real mirrors. The humanist Tito Vespasiano Strozzi gave away metal mirrors that had his portrait on the reverse side, and another case for such a Platonic mirror medal can be found among the works of the Roman medalist Lysippus. Finally, the idea of self-improvement and self-fashioning must have been especially important for a painter who really paints his countenance. Or to put it differently, the metaphor of self-modeling, the presumption that every person, as in the famous dictum of Pico della Mirandola, would be one's own sculptor and designer, gains a special meaning when applied to artists. I just show you as a reminder this famous drawing after Daniele da Volterra's reliefs in a chapel in Santa Trinita dei Monti, where Michelangelo is holding up a mirror in the role or as a kind of modern Socrates and a modern judge for art. Ideal forms, ideal seeing, and ideal making and the ideal self were a very special challenge in the case of artists' self-portraits. So I stop at this point. We are all looking forward to hearing and discussing today and tomorrow ideal forms and ideal seeing in the Renaissance. Thank you very much again for participating in this conference.
Il ritmo sarà molto serrato, quindi dovremo cominciare immediatamente con le due prime comunicazioni che dovrebbero invitare a una discussione, penso, molto intensa e che riguardano la comunicazione di Gian Mario Anselmi del Dipartimento di Italianistica dell'Università di Bologna, che ci parlerà di vedere dall'alto e vedere dal basso l'occhio etico, estetico e politico di Alberti e Machiavelli. Quindi mi permetto di chiamarti, che sarà seguito dalla comunicazione di Stéphane Toussaint di CNRS e Société Marcil Fissin a Parigi sull'occhio di vicino. Devo ricordare, non voglio essere cattiva, ma abbiamo previsto 30 minuti per ogni comunicazione per avere spazio per la discussione, quindi mi permetto di gentilmente voler accettare queste regole. Gian Mario Anselmi.
Allora, buona mattinata a tutti.